Computer, begin historical record playback. Subject, the human patience breaking point, I say, adjusting my recording apparatus. My name is Kaz Thrax, senior historian of the New Galactic Archives, and I'm here to tell you about the day everything changed. Oh, you want to hear about the humans? I chuckle, my secondary breathing sacs wheezing slightly. Get comfortable, young ones. This isn't your typical historical lecture. This is the story of how the most underestimated species in the galaxy made everyone else look like primitive cave dwellers. You see, the Galactic Council, those pompous bags of mostly water, thought they had it all figured out. They sat in their crystalline towers on Centauri Prime, making decisions for thousands of species across millions of worlds. And then they met the humans. But historian Kaz Thrax, my students often ask, how could anyone underestimate the humans? Everyone knows they're... And I have to stop them right there. Because you see, that's the most delicious part of this story. The Council, in their infinite wisdom, pause for sarcastic effect, classified Earth as a manageable death world when they first discovered it. Can you believe that? Manageable, huh? They saw the humans' primitive fusion drives, their quaint planetary defense systems, their limited colonial presence. Oh, how cute, they said. They're trying to be a spacefaring civilization. The Council patronized them at every turn. No, no, dear humans, you can't build colonies there. It might disturb the local wildlife. Meanwhile, the Vraxian Empire was strip mining entire systems. Oh, you'll need to register that ship design with us first, they'd say, while the Zenth Collective was literally building ships that could crack planets. I remember attending one of the early council sessions. Ambassador Chan from Earth sat there smiling politely while High Councillor Zignax lectured her about responsible species management. That smile, by the void, if we'd only known what that smile meant. But they seemed so nice. That's what everyone said afterward. So pleasant, so agreeable, so accommodating. They took every restriction, every regulation, every patronizing pat on the head with those enigmatic smiles. They didn't protest when their mining rights were restricted. They didn't complain when their terraform requests were denied. They just smiled and adapted. And the Council thought this meant the humans knew their place. They actually congratulated themselves on successfully integrating a Death World species into galactic society. If only they'd bothered to study human history. If only they'd looked closer at those smiles. Because here's the thing about humans that the Council never understood. Their patience isn't infinite. Their politeness isn't weakness. And those smiles, they weren't submission. They were warnings. Computer, mark historical notation, I wheeze, taking a moment to moisturize my speaking membranes. This is where the real story begins. The story of how the humans finally stopped being nice. The Council's fatal dance with human patience began on what they call Standard Cycle 2847. I remember it clearly. The Council chambers were particularly stuffy that day, filled with the usual self-important dignitaries and their endless array of assistants. High Councillor Zignax, that insufferable windbag, stood at the central podium, announcing what he thought would be just another routine restriction on human activities. The Council has determined, he droned in that grating harmonic voice of his, that human expansion into the Orion Spur must be immediately halted. Ambassador Maya Rodriguez sat in the human delegation's booth, and oh, how I wish I had captured this moment on holovid. She didn't smile. For the first time in recorded Council history, a human diplomat didn't smile. Honourable Council, she said, standing with a grace that made Zignax's pompous posturing look like a drunken Glorbon at a mating ritual. I must warn you that this decision will have consequences. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. A warning? From a human? The sheer audacity. Several council members actually laughed. Imagine that, laughing at a human warning. Looking back, it's almost enough to make you feel sorry for them, almost. Ambassador Rodriguez, Zignax said, his tone dripping with condescension, surely you understand that this is for the greater good of galactic stability. Your species' rapid expansion is making other members uncomfortable. Maya Rodriguez lifted an eyebrow. Such a simple gesture, yet it sent chills down my dorsal ridges. Uncomfortable, she repeated, letting the word hang in the air like a plasma charge about to detonate. I see. And the Vraxians' complete destruction of the Rigel system's resources made you comfortable. That's when she pulled out a data crystal, bright blue, standard council format. Before you vote on this restriction, she said, I'd like to present some economic projections. Now, what happened next was, well, it was beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way. Rodriguez began outlining how human corporations had, quite legally and quite thoroughly, become essential to galactic trade. Human shipping companies handled 40% of all interstellar cargo. Human mining operations provided 35% of all rare earth elements. Human medical technologies were being used in 60% of all major hospitals. But these are precisely why we must restrict your expansion, Councillor Tapax interrupted. You're becoming too influential. Rodriguez's laugh. Oh, that laugh. It wasn't mocking or angry. It was the kind of laugh you give when watching a child insist that the sky is green. Honourable Council, she said, you misunderstand. I'm not telling you this to boast. I'm telling you this so you'll understand why restricting human expansion would cause an immediate 47% drop in galactic economic productivity. The silence that followed was deafening. Several council members began frantically checking their own datapads. The Zenth representative actually turned a shade of purple I'd never seen before. This is economic blackmail, Zignax sputtered. Not at all, Rodriguez replied, that famous human smile finally returning. This is simply cause and effect. You restrict our expansion. We have to reduce our operations. Basic business practice. Nothing personal. The vote was delayed, of course, but the damage was done. For the first time, the council realized that while they'd been busy patting humans on the head, humans had been quietly building something far more powerful than warships: economic interdependence. Computer. Historical notation. I pause. My throat sacks dry from excitement. This marked the first public display of human resistance. But more importantly, it was the day the Council learned that humans had mastered a form of warfare they hadn't even recognized as warfare. They should have heeded Rodriguez's warning, should have noticed how human ships were already repositioning throughout the galaxy, how human corporations were quietly stockpiling resources. Should have realized that humans don't just plan for success, they plan for failure too. But the Council, in their infinite wisdom, decided to double down. After all, what could one Deathworld species possibly do against the combined might of the Galactic Council? Oh, my young students, what they were about to learn. The Council's response to human economic maneuvering was, predictably, as subtle as a supernova. They decided to blockade Earth. Yes, you heard that correctly. They tried to blockade a Deathworld, but here's where it gets interesting. Deploy the 7th Enforcement Fleet, High Councillor Zignax commanded, probably expecting the humans to cower before such an impressive display of force. The fleet materialized in the Sol system, 200 warships, arranged in the standard Galactic Council blockade formation. Quite impressive if you like that sort of thing. Enter Admiral James Chen, commander of Earth's supposedly modest defense force. Now, there's something you should know about Chen. He had a reputation for being unnaturally calm, the kind of calm that makes predators nervous. When the Council fleet arrived, Chen sent them a message. Just 3 words: Welcome to Sol. The Council commander, some uptight Vraxian named Krell, demanded immediate human compliance with the blockade. Chen's response? He invited them to watch a mining operation. Yes, a mining operation. The Council fleet actually began broadcasting amused messages among themselves about primitive human attempts at distraction. That's when Chen unveiled what he called Operation Rockhopper. See, while everyone was focused on the blockade, human mining ships had been quietly positioning themselves throughout the asteroid belt. Nothing unusual there. Humans were always mucking about with asteroids. But these weren't ordinary mining ships. Oh no, These were the new XM-457 Wolverine-class mining vessels. The Council had approved their design themselves, classified them as harmless resource extraction vehicles. "Beginning standard mining operations," Chen announced pleasantly. "We apologize for any gravitational disturbances." The mining ships activated their gravity manipulation fields, ostensibly for moving asteroids. But Chen had discovered something interesting. When you align multiple gravity fields just right, you create what humans call a gravitational lens. Suddenly, every asteroid within range became a potential projectile. The Council fleet found themselves in the middle of what Chen later described as a game of solar system-sized pinball. "This is an act of war," Krell screeched over the comms. "Not at all," Chen replied, sounding for all the world like he was discussing lunch plans. "We're simply conducting approved mining operations. If your ships happen to be in the path of our legally sanctioned asteroid movement, well, that's hardly our fault, is it?" One by one, the Council ships had to move out of formation to avoid the suddenly very mobile asteroids. Every time they tried to regroup, another wave of mining operations would force them to scatter. The best part? Not a single weapon was fired. The humans were literally rearranging the solar system with approved civilian equipment, and there wasn't a thing the Council could do about it. "Perhaps," Chen suggested after 3 days of this astronomical ballet, "your fleet would be more comfortable observing from a safer distance. Say, outside the solar system." The Council fleet retreated. They called it a strategic redeployment, but everyone knew what it really was. Earth's orbital lanes were now clear, and humanity hadn't violated a single Council regulation. "Computer, mark historical notation," I say, my speaking membranes quivering with excitement. This incident became known as the peaceful persuasion among humans. Among Council species, it was called the asteroid humiliation. But while everyone was focusing on Chen's masterful display of military passive aggression, something far more significant was happening. Human ships across the galaxy were quietly changing position. Supply lines were being rerouted, and in thousands of seemingly unrelated locations, mysterious equipment was being installed in human mining operations. The Council, still reeling from their failed blockade, completely missed these preparations. They were too busy trying to find a way to classify gravity manipulation as a weapon, retroactively, of course. They should have been paying attention to the bigger picture. Should have noticed that every human smile had disappeared. Should have remembered that on Earth, the calm before the storm is when things are most dangerous. But they didn't. And that's why nobody was prepared for what happened next. You know what's fascinating about humans? Their concept of lines in the sand. Most species have limits, of course, but humans? They draw their lines with absolute clarity, and when you cross them, well, that's what we're about to discuss. The Council's fatal mistake occurred on what humans call Tuesday, just a regular Tuesday. The medical ship, Hope's Light, was en route to the Centauri colony, carrying vaccines for a particularly nasty strain of space flu. Dr. Alexandra Patel, the ship's commander, had already earned legendary status across 3 sectors for her work in crisis medicine. Here's where the Council made their worst decision since trying to tax black holes. Some brilliant strategist decided that the best way to show humans who's really in charge was to make an example of this medical ship. After all, it was just doctors and nurses, right? The Council enforcement vessel, Justice Bringer, intercepted Hope's Light at the Proxima checkpoint. Their commander, some trigger-happy Zenth named Vax Tull, demanded an extensive inspection, citing suspected contraband. Dr. Patel's response was recorded for historical preservation. "This ship carries 20,000 doses of time-sensitive vaccines. Children will die if we delay. Please confirm you understand this fact." Vax Tull, displaying all the wisdom of a concussed Glorban, ordered his gunners to fire a warning shot. The plasma burst grazed Hope's Light's medical bay. No one was hurt, but 3,000 doses of vaccine were destroyed. Now let me paint you a picture of Dr. Alexandra Patel. Before this moment, she'd spent 30 years saving lives across the galaxy. She'd treated species that could kill her with a sneeze. She'd performed surgery in zero gravity during pirate attacks. The woman had endless patience. The transformation in Dr. Patel was remarkable. The security footage shows her standing at her command console, still wearing her medical whites. But her expression? That's what we now call the look. "Computer," she said, her voice carrying the kind of calm that makes survival instincts scream in terror. "Initiate Protocol Nightingale." Nobody knew what Protocol Nightingale was. Turns out every human medical ship had hidden capabilities. Not weapons. Humans are cleverer than that. Instead, they had what Dr. Patel called defensive medical systems. Hope's Light's hull suddenly sprouted what looked like standard medical scanners. Except these scanners weren't searching for diseases. They were mapping every weakness, every vulnerability, every potentially fatal flaw in the Council ship's design. "Commander Vaxtol," Dr. Patel's voice carried across the comm channels. "Let me explain something in medical terms. You just turned my ship into a patient, and I'm a doctor. I know exactly where to operate." Those medical scanners? They could pinpoint structural stress points with surgical precision. The ship's maneuvering thrusters? Calibrated to create pressure differentials that could snap a vessel's spine like a brittle bone. "You have exactly 10 seconds to power down your weapons," Patel announced. "After that, I'll be forced to perform emergency surgery on your ship. I should warn you, the survival rate for this procedure is exactly 0%. Vaxatul surrendered. Smart move." But it was too late. Dr. Patel sent a message to Earth. Just 3 words. They killed children. The response came from every human ship, station and colony simultaneously. A single phrase broadcast on all frequencies: "No more nice." Humanity issued what became known as the 12-hour ultimatum. Ambassador Rodriguez delivered it personally to the Council. I was there. I'll never forget it. She walked into the Council chamber, no longer wearing the traditional diplomatic robes. Instead, she wore what humans call a business suit. Black, crisp, and somehow more terrifying than battle armor. "In 11 hours and 58 minutes, she announced, "humanity will demonstrate why Earth is classified as a death world. You have until then to surrender unconditionally." The Council laughed. Actually laughed. "And if we refuse?" High Counselor Zignax asked. Rodriguez smiled. Not the diplomatic smile, not the patient smile. This was something new, something that made my survival instincts want to burrow into the nearest planet's core. "Then we'll remove the Council," she said simply. "Not with warships, not with weapons. We'll simply stop being nice." "You'll stop being nice," Zignax repeated mockingly. "That's your threat?" Rodriguez nodded. "We've spent years building your medical facilities, managing your trade routes, running your mines, maintaining your ships. Tell me, Counselor, what happens when every human doctor suddenly decides to take a day off? When every human transport pilot decides they need a vacation? When every human technician decides to stop being helpful?" The Council chamber went very, very quiet. 12 hours, Rodriguez repeated. "For once I suggest you make a wise decision." Computer historical notation. I pause, my speaking membranes dry with excitement. This moment became known as the Patient Zero, the instant when humanity's legendary tolerance for bureaucratic nonsense finally ran out. The Council had 11 hours and 47 minutes to consider what a galaxy without helpful humans would look like. They spent 10 of those hours arguing, of course. Typical. But in the background, human ships were moving with synchronized precision. Human stations were powering up systems nobody knew they had. And in every sector, on every world, humans were preparing to demonstrate why you should never, ever mistake patience for weakness. The Council's time was running out, and with it, their chance to avoid learning exactly why humans came from a death world. When the 12-hour deadline arrived, the Council still hadn't responded. In their defense, they were busy arguing about proper voting procedures for surrender protocols. Politicians. Am I right? That's when Commander Olivia Blake's face appeared on every screen in Council space. Not just communication screens. Every screen. Entertainment devices, medical displays, even personal data pads. Nobody ever figured out how they managed that. "Good morning," she said, looking like she was about to announce a weather report rather than humanity's revelation of power. "We tried being nice. We really did. But since you're determined to learn this lesson the hard way..." That's when the Ghost Fleet appeared, and when I say appeared, I mean literally materialized throughout Council space. Remember those mining operations I mentioned earlier? Turns out humans had been building ships inside asteroids. Thousands of them. The Ghost Fleet's emergence was, well, let me put it this way. Imagine you're a predator, very proud of your teeth and claws, and suddenly you realize you've been playing with something that was wearing fluffy sheep's clothing over battle armor. "For the past decade," Blake continued, her voice carrying that special kind of human calm that makes apex predators nervous, "while you were busy patronizing us, we built this fleet inside your own territory. Legally. Using approved mining permits. Would you like to know how?" The Council certainly wanted to know. So did everyone else watching. "Your own regulations state that mining operations can refine and shape extracted materials. Well, we just happened to shape them into ships. Fully armed, completely operational ships, hidden in plain sight, because you never bothered to ask what we were building with all that metal. The Ghost Fleet's design was unconventional. No standardized Council configurations here. These ships looked like they were designed by someone who'd read How to Build a Warship and thought, nice guidelines, but what if we made it scarier? You see," Blake continued, examining her nails like she wasn't currently commanding the largest reveal of military might in galactic history. "Humans have this saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We hoped you'd treat us as equals. We prepared for you not to." That's when she triggered what humans call a demonstration. Every Ghost Fleet ship activated their shields simultaneously. The energy surge was so massive it showed up on sensors 3 sectors away. "Those mining lasers you approved? Turns out they work really well for precision strikes. Those gravity manipulators, excellent for tactical maneuvers. Those medical scanners, perfect for targeting. Funny how that works out." The Council's military advisors were having collective nervous breakdowns. The Ghost Fleet wasn't just powerful, it was completely unlike anything in their tactical databases. How do you fight an enemy who turns civilian equipment into weapons you've never seen before? "But here's the best part," Blake said, now grinning like a teacher about to reveal the solution to a particularly clever puzzle. "We didn't break a single one of your regulations building this fleet. You approved every component, every system, every capability. You just never thought to ask why a simple Deathworld species would need industrial mining lasers powerful enough to cut through battleship armor." Then came the final blow. Blake leaned forward, her expression shifting to something that made hardened warrior species want to hide under their command consoles. "We tried being nice. We followed your rules. We filled out your forms. We smiled at your condescension. And how did you repay that patience? You threatened our children. So now you get to see what happens when humans decide that being nice isn't worth the effort." "Computer, historical notation," I interject, trying to keep my voice steady. "This speech is now required study material in every major military academy in known space." The Council surrendered 20 minutes later. Probably a record for fastest political decision in their history. Amazing how quickly bureaucracy can move when there's a fleet of ships built by irritated humans in orbit. And that's how the galaxy learned that when humans say, "We tried being nice," it's not an admission of failure. It's a warning that they're about to demonstrate why nice was a courtesy, not a necessity. The Council's surrender was, as humans say, anticlimactic. No grand battles. No heroic last stands. Just a bunch of politicians, suddenly discovering they could, in fact, make decisions quickly when properly motivated. The signing ceremony was particularly memorable. Ambassador Rodriguez walked into the council chamber, carrying an archaic earth writing instrument, a fountain pen, she called it. Because some things, she announced, should be signed in ink, not digital signatures. The new galactic order established that day was different. Humans didn't demand revenge. They didn't strip anyone of power or demand reparations. Instead, they did something far more terrifying. They started actually fixing things. "We've reviewed your bureaucratic processes," Rodriguez told the trembling council members. "Did you know your standard permit application has 472 redundant steps? We've simplified it to 12. You're welcome." The reforms came swift and merciless. Trade routes? Reorganized for efficiency rather than political favoritism. Medical services? Standardized across species lines. Technology sharing? Mandatory, with safeguards against misuse. Most terrifying of all, they made everything make sense. "But what about our traditional procedures?" one council member wailed during a particularly dramatic reform session. "Your traditional procedures," Rodriguez replied with that new human smile, the one that suggested they were done playing nice but willing to be reasonable, once required 17 different permits to deliver emergency medical supplies. Traditions that cost lives are traditions that need updating. The humans appointed Dr. Alexandra Patel as head of the new Galactic Medical Corps. Her first action? Establishing emergency response protocols that didn't require paperwork during actual emergencies. Revolutionary concept, that. Admiral Chen took charge of reforming the military structure. He introduced this bizarre concept called practical training instead of ceremonial drills, the horror. Commander Blake. She turned the Ghost Fleet into a rapid response force for natural disasters and humanitarian crises. Those ships built in secret became symbols of hope rather than conquest. Clever humans. They knew the best way to prevent future conflicts was to make themselves indispensable, again. Computer, personal notation, I pause, my speaking membranes tingling with amusement. The humans' greatest victory wasn't in revealing their strength. It was in showing us how much better things could be if we just stopped being stupid about rules. Looking back now, cycles later, it's fascinating how they changed us. Not through force, though they certainly had that option. Not through economic pressure, though they could have crushed us there too. No, they changed us by simply showing us a better way. They kept their patience right up until we proved we didn't deserve it. Then they proved why Earth's classification should have read Deathworld. Approach with respect rather than manageable. These days, human diplomatic ships still carry medical supplies. Their mining vessels still help with resource extraction. Their traders still facilitate commerce. But nobody mistakes their helpfulness for weakness anymore. Nobody forgets what happened the last time humanity's patience ran out. Computer, final historical notation, I say, preparing to end this recording. The humans have a saying, kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. The galaxy learned this lesson the hard way. And that, young ones, is why every species still tells stories about the day the Deathworlders decided to stop being nice. It's why every council chamber now has a small plaque that reads, "Patience is a virtue. Human patience is a warning." More importantly, it's why the galaxy finally learned that the most dangerous species isn't the one that bares its teeth first. It's the one that smiles, helps, builds, heals, and then reveals that every act of kindness was also preparation for war. End historical record, I announce, feeling satisfied with today's lecture. And remember, students, if a human ever tells you they're done being nice, don't walk away. Run.